You need to stop buying these and start buying these. The number one question you see over all of social media is, what camera did you film this on? And although it's a very valid question, it's probably not the one you want to be asking. With technology getting better as the years go on and the differences between cameras being smaller and smaller, you've got such as the Fujifilm camera that just come out. It's a full frame sensor with amazing quality, very similar characteristics to kind of the Sony A4. With those small differences now getting closer and closer, you've got Sony cameras and Canon cameras effectively being the same. Granted, Sony's amazing at low light, but still producing amazing looking quality between the two of them. Being able to match cameras now is even easier because they're just all so good, and those barriers and that differences are so minimal. So when you're seeing those big differences between cameras, it's fundamentally down to the lens that they're using. Now, I don't know fully the inner workings of lenses. However, the simplest way to understand it is there's multiple layers of glass in here, and all these layers of glass work together to get you the image that you want to see. In short, the more you pay, the better quality it's going to be. That glass is going to be thicker. It's going to be better carved into the correct shapes it needs to be to make a sharper image. If you think about the concave of like your eye, that is mimicked in one of these, and it's depending on the lens and how well it's been done, that's either really good or really bad. In short, how your eyes might be if you've got good vision versus bad vision. So maybe it's time that you start thinking about asking people, what lens do you use, rather than what camera do you use? But why do lenses matter? And I'm not being funny, but you're not seeing things like the Batman filmed on a small kit lens from Sony, like one of these tiny little things. Granted, you're seeing it done on a £50 vintage lens, however, it's a nice lens. But in short, at the end of the day, you're not going to go out there and get a Alexa Mini, red kimono, Blackmagic Pro and shove a small little kit lens from Sony onto an expensive camera. You're going to put an expensive lens, because fundamentally, if you put a bad lens on a good camera, it's still going to look bad. There's a reason that cinema lenses exist, and these cinema lenses are these huge big things that roughly cost somewhere in the range of £4,000 to £10,000. Now, this is very much out of budget for anyone ever, but there's a reason why this glass costs so much. Have a think when you buy a pair of glasses like this, for example. The more you spend on a lens, the higher quality you're going to have. The same is true for your camera lenses, but that doesn't mean we're going to have to break the bank. So we're going to look at 4 lenses now, 4 different lenses of different ranges, all with an affordable budget that kind of show you the different quality levels you can get with different lenses. To better understand the differences between qualities of lenses, we're going to look at 4 lenses today. We've got the old A6000 kit lens. We have got one of the cheapest 50mm primes from Sony. We have the lens I'm shooting on right now, which is the 17 to 28 Tamron lens. And then finally, just for fun, just to see what it's like and how it compares, an old $100 vintage lens from Unitor, and it's 35mm, and this one goes down to an aperture of 2.8. What I decided to do was just go out into the garden and just see what we could capture that kind of had a bit of contrast and a bit of detailing that we could use to kind of test the sharpness on each of these lenses and test that quality. Everything was shot on its lowest aperture of 2.8, besides the kit lens, which its lowest aperture was 3.5. But let's take a look at them and kind of compare and just point out things that we can see. So the first one we're going to look at is going to be the 50mm Sony prime lens, which is one of the cheapest ones they've got out there. As we can see by the footage, it's very soft. It looks nice. Visually, it's a very nice one. Like I said, we were shooting at kind of 2.8 on this one, but as you can see kind of on the detailing, specifically around the chair, it's quite soft, and that's a nice look, to be fair. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a very good quality lens, but we can see that softness around some of those details, be it the hatching in the chair, be it the edge of the lens. It's not as crisp as it could be, per se. It's, like I said, it's nice, but it has that softness. If we compare that to our kit lens as well, the kit lens I noticed is very, very soft. You've got a lot of ghosting around the edges. Like I said, these are all shot at relatively similar exposures. We tried to make sure everything was the same, but if you look at all the edges and lines on this, you can effectively see it's not chromatic aberration per se, but there is a weirdness in the lines where you kind of see a separation of color, and that kind of that sharpness that we saw in the 50mm was significantly less than what we're getting in this one. So all the lines, all the ability to focus is just not as sharp, and weirdly enough the colouring is completely different as well. Granted, these are all ungraded, but the colouring I found was very different on this. On camera it felt very high contrasty. Here it feels very green, and it kind of feels like it's got a green tint in it. So again, the effects of using a kit lens on how they can change the colouring, how they can change the sharpness of the lines, all has a part to play. Next up we had the Tamron 17-28, and as you can see by this one, this is one of my favourite lenses at the minute. It is so crisp and sharp, and the colouring is really, really nice, as you can see throughout all of this clip, especially when you're looking at the hatchings. Like I said, I wanted to make sure that there was things that would be able to show the sharpness really well. So around the chair, kind of around the hatchings on the chair and on the table, you're really being able to pick out those details and see those fine lines. If you were to zoom in here, which I'll possibly do in post, you can see that the edges of everything look sharp. And when we compare it to the 50mm, which we saw had odd lines on the edge, and especially the kit lens, where we could see there was that kind of greenish ghosting on the edge of all the sharp lines. In this Tamron, none of that exists, and it is very, very, very sharp. And again, like I said, the colouring kind of changes depending on your lens, and I've always found, specifically with this Tamron lens, for something that's shot in log, in S-Log3, it's very contrasty, which is quite nice. I quite like that. I like being able to kind of get a less flat but flat enough image out of my camera. But you can see the colour difference that we got between the kit lens, the 50mm and the Tamron. Significantly different colours, significantly different levels of sharpness, and just overall quality, especially if you look in the corners of the screen. And then our final one, like I said, just for fun, I wanted to test out, we have our vintage lens. Now this one feels like there's a Pro Mist black filter on it permanently. Everything kind of has this slightly hazy, washed look to it. Now, if I was shooting something that required that, I would use this lens straight up. I probably wouldn't use this for many other things, specifically if I was trying to get that vintage look. But as you can see, an older, different style of glass actually does replicate that look. You can see kind of in the bokeh, the way the bokeh is handled is so different to the digital side of things with the more modern lenses. And you're seeing, like I said, hazing around a lot of the screen. You're seeing a little bit of chromatic aberration, but kind of things that you would expect from a vintage lens to have. This is where lens choices can become a stylistic thing. So do you want the sharpness and contrastiness that you get from the Tamron here, or do you want to go for that vintage stylistic look that you could get by getting and using a vintage lens that can kind of give you that look that you might want straight out of the camera? So we can see that the better quality and the more expensive lens that you use, the nicer the image is going to look. The 50mm is significantly better than the kit lens. The 17-28 is significantly sharper and crisper than our cheaper 50mm prime lens. And the vintage lens kind of has its own thing going on, where it looks like there's a black Pro Mist filter on it permanently, but I quite like that. Now this video isn't sponsored by Tamron at all, but Tamron have a phenomenal range of lenses that you can buy for an affordable amount of money. And at the end of the day, as you saw, Tamron had a very sharp, crisp looking lens. It's the lens I'm using now to do this talking head here, the one I always use in all of my videos. From 17-28, 35-150, and the entire scope 150-300, and all of these are quite a fast aperture of 2.8. I mean, take the 35-150, it's a new range by them, and probably the first we've ever seen in this kind of zoom focal range, especially at this aperture. If I was to get this lens, there's a very slim chance I would actually ever need any other lens than the lens I'm using right now, and potentially you could really break down your kit to just 2 lenses. But fundamentally, buying good quality glass is what's going to improve your video quality. 16-35 APS-C kit lens on an Alexa Mini, it's not going to look good. The quality of glass is just not there in this kind of lens. But then if you look at the more expensive and the better lenses out there, you're going to see that quality in production, that quality in glass. So before you think about buying a new body or getting a new camera, have a look at buying some new lenses and investing in something that's going to last you a long time. In short, when you buy a new camera, that old camera is never going to get used. I rarely ever touch my A6000 anymore because I've got the A7 III. Whereas when I bought that, I invested in the 50mm lens and this Tamron lens, and those lenses have come with me onto that new body, so that quality of image is still there because I'm still using those nice quality lenses. But until next time, I won't leave it so long. Take care.